This is the Franchise QB Podcast, where we empower entrepreneurs to win big in franchising. We huddle up weekly to educate our audience about the most successful small business model ever created, franchising.
Welcome to the Franchise QB Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Halpern, a 20-year industry veteran and entrepreneur. My mission is for listeners to achieve their American dreams of creating wealth and independence through franchise ownership. Every week, we speak with franchisees, franchisors, or vendors that support the industry. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started. Joining us in the huddle today is Dave Hansen, franchise owner and CEO of ClientTether, the franchise CRM. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great to see you. So let's start with your franchise ownership journey. I know it's a little backwards because you got involved with ClientTether first, but tell me a little bit about how you found franchising and how you kind of got into that business.
Yeah, for sure. And I've been a little bit entrepreneurial since I was 5, right? I started my first, wasn't an LLC, but I went door to door and sold stuff to try to make money from baseball cards. But I've started a couple of businesses, from e-commerce to tutoring companies. In fact, if I would have stuck with that, I might have, been a meat tutor doctor to the market. But so I love business. I've helped run businesses. I've been in sales, and when I transitioned into the franchising industry, it's hard once you start to see it from the inside. It's hard not to say, "Holy crap! Like that's a great opportunity. That's a great opportunity." I mean, you know this because you help people find the right match for where they're going to be successful at. But I just kept working with brands where I was like, "Man, I'd like to own one of those. I can see how they're performing. They're crushing it." And so I have a bit of a backwards view where I see it from the inside out. And so it all started with my wife and I told her, I was like, "Hey, last year, early in the year, I was like, I think this year I want to buy a family business. Let's get a franchise because we'll get off the ground quickly. They've got the systems in place, all the reasons why people should be thinking about franchising." And then I started looking at brands, and I looked at several. I had a client who reached out and he's like, "I heard you're looking. I'll give you 2. I won't charge you a fee because you'll kill it." And I was like, "That's nice of you. Where's your item 19? And he's like, "I don't have one." And I was like, then I'm not really interested. My wife was the one who's like, I'm not, if I can't see financial performance data, I'm not going to do it. And that's not necessarily the only reason to look at something, but to us, that was an important validation. And then,
yeah, I think you want to have some degree of predictability with the item 19. It doesn't mean that's how you're going to do, but you want to start with that foundation and then go from there.
Yeah. And you're the expert on that. You look at hundreds and hundreds of those, right? You know what's up, but that was kind of the beginning of our journey. And then one of my clients who uses us to sell franchises, I've been a high school baseball coach and played a lot of sports, so I love athletics. Been involved in the community, both rec and accelerated in high school. So I knew a lot of people, and his concept is cool. It's a franchise that's about athletic apparel and equipment. They work with high schools and rec groups, and even some colleges and club teams, local stuff. And I kind of jokingly said, "Hey, is my territory open?" And he said, "No, it's in financing. Sorry, dude." And so I went back to work, and about 2 weeks later, he texted me. He's like, "Dave, were you serious? Because his financing just fell apart. And if you're serious, I'll send you. I'd like to talk to you about it." I was like, "Yeah, send me an FDD. Fine, like disclose me." And then
this brand is called Team Up Athletics.
Team Up Athletics. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and Jason's a good friend of mine now. Obviously, we work together a lot on both sides of the business now. But so he sent me the FDD, and and I looked at it, I was like, "What?" Like, I had no idea this was such a profitable business. And I looked at their growth rate, and I know I have the goggles on, right? Like, corporate, it's a very small emerging brand. So you can see, like, that's the corporate office that's growing fast. I won't be dedicating that much time to it yet. So, but it was impressive. And so I showed it to my wife, and she was like, "Oh, this is the first brand I've looked at that I'm actually interested in," because I was putting home service brands in front of her because they're ugly, but their P&Ls are not ugly.
Yeah.
They make
boring businesses, they pay off, but it's not, they're not as exciting as maybe something that deals with athletics. So this is pretty cool that you can marry like a home-based business with something you guys are passionate about.
Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, obviously we went through some more vetting and some Q&A, and it was bizarre because it's like it was meant to be. We were going on our 20-year anniversary trip to Hawaii, and while we're in Honolulu, Jason, the CEO, was flying to Honolulu. So we signed our FTD disclosure in the airport in Honolulu while we're both there randomly together. It was crazy.
That's awesome. Well, it's cool. You and I have that in common. I didn't coach high school athletics, but I coached my kids when they were in Little League for 14 spring and fall seasons. So it was really great to be a part of the community and just have that interaction with the kids. And like, I can see how you can kind of tie that into, Team Up, where you're, selling your products to schools and universities and local leagues and clubs and things like that. So it kind of ties in something that you've done with like a need that they have in the community, which is really cool.
Oh, it's fun. And the thing is, like, I've been able to kind of apply my background. This is the beauty of franchising, right? The consistent business model, all the support systems, but I've got different ideas, and we've been able to completely blow up. We had like 4,600 soccer jerseys go out last month to, actually this month, it's still August, to local not high schools, but recreation groups. They're 10 times better than what they've been putting on kids before. We're really able to like shape the dynamic of apparel in this community, and I love it because the kids.
So out of the gate, when you signed your franchise agreement on the way to Honolulu, love that story. Did you start with 2 territories, or did you start with 1 territory and then kind of upgrade to the second one? How did that look when you kind of got into the system?
Yeah, I bought 2, and I did that because and often it's wise, depending on what the investment is and how much capital and resources you've got, to just start with 1. But I wanted 2 because it was a great territory. It's proximal to me, like they were adjacent, and I also knew that if I waited a year, it wouldn't be around, and so I wanted to kind of lock it up. So I bought both of them.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about you mentioned that you guys were looking at home services. Was there anything specific that you and your wife were looking for when you kind of went out there? I mean, obviously it was kind of serendipitous that you knew the guy that kind of owned the franchise, but what were you guys actually looking for when you set out to say, hey, we want a family business?
A couple of things. I'm glad you asked that because it's really important. And I have kind of like a cheat code because I know the executive teams of the brand. So for the first thing I did is I looked at all the brands that I knew the executive teams and knew that they would get my back and they had great systems to support me. I looked at brands like Footprints Floors. I looked at, I decided not to go down the painting route only because our founders founded a painting brand and I hit this territory sold out. So I have to compete against my founder and my friend in the local market. But painting franchises are pretty lucrative. I looked at some dry event cleaning, some roofing concepts. In fact, I was going to pull a trigger on a Footprints Floors brand, but I didn't tell the CEO I was about ready. And he sold my territory like, no joke, 12 hours before I told him I was ready to buy it. So
that's crazy. Yeah, that brand did sell quickly.
Yeah, it's a good one. So, but anything like that, anything that touches a home, I've just seen the P&Ls. They all do really well. So that was where I was looking. My wife just kept saying, I don't want to get on a roof. Like to her, it wasn't like appealing in any way whatsoever, and she has to run it. So that was kind of why we ended up steering away from a lot of the kind of the dirty, gross brands that have good appeal.
Well, we'll get into your background in tech in a minute, but when you were looking under the hood at these companies, like what technology, support structures, operational support, like what were you looking for, and what should a franchise buyer look for when they kind of get into the weeds to figure out like what tech is behind it that's going to help me run this business?
It's critical, and it's not just about tech, right? You mentioned tech and process infrastructure. Especially in a service brand where you've got a lot of lead volume that you need to manage, there needs to be one of 2 things in place. You either need to have a rockin' sales automation tool as part of your tech package that's going to do a lot of that heavy lift for you. So text, call, email automation, like get in touch with those leads, get you on the phone, because 80% of your effort in sales is usually chasing, but you won't have time to do that and run the business when you first get started. So I was looking for people that had made good investments in technology, but more importantly, also infrastructure. Some of these brands, that they actually have a call center that takes your inbound leads, uses technology to text them, call them, email them, and then they'll schedule them for you. And so I've spent my time now upstream. I'm not chasing top of funnel leads. I'm chasing appointments and getting quotes out and closing deals. So I was looking for someone that would create scale because I run a tech company and my wife needed to do most of this. So those were key things for me. The success rates follow those, right? The brands that invest the most in these types of tech and infrastructure to support the selling process and marketing, I find unless there's something crazy on the back end with operations, they tend to be most successful, and it's easier to get started too.
Yeah, and I think when you're doing that research, you need to figure out what gets demoed while you're in the discovery process with the franchisor, but also when you're doing validation calls with the owners, like figure out like where are the holes? I mean, is there something that is just not being offered that you really see as a problem in your business. And if you find that, everything's kind of solved currently, then that's probably a pretty good sign. And as you know, technology changes, so you want to find a franchisor that's going to keep up with the time. So let's talk a little bit about your ownership model. Like, did you guys come in as owner operators, like you're going to be in doing this day to day, like Dan in a van, Chuck in a truck kind of thing? Or did you guys feel like, all right, we're going to do this in a semi-absentee capacity? What was kind of your approach when you joined franchise ownership?
Yeah, so it was split, right? Because I'm running a tech company. So I was going to be very semi-absentee, mostly absentee. And Amy, my wife, was going to be the primary operator. Our oldest son was helping out as well when we first started. So it's been primarily just us in doing the work. We haven't hired anybody else yet, although we've been looking and trying to find people, because we're getting to that point now where it's getting big enough. We need to keep scaling to the next level. We need more human capital on it. So we were trying to find the right person to help us manage through that change.
Awesome. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about the tech company that you're the CEO of now, which is ClientTether. ClientTether, for those that don't know, is a CRM designed specifically for the franchising industry. So tell me the story of how you got connected with them. You're in the tech industry and you come across ClientTether. How did that come together so that you jumped in and discovered this tool that's just so powerful for the franchise space?
Yeah, I'll give you the short version because it's kind of funny, but I was at a camp out. So oldest son is the same age as the oldest son of the founder of ClientTether. And but I knew he's also the founder of Franchise System, Painter One, and he was the founder of 5-Star Painting. Like, he's been in this industry for a long time. And so we're just at the campfire, and he says, "Oh yeah, I'm also running this tech company." And I laughed at him. I was like, "What are you doing with a tech company, Conrad?" And he's like, "I don't know, but it's going pretty well." And so he told me what they did, and I was running a global sales team for a translation organization, and we had like Salesforce and all these plugins, and we thought we were like killing it. And he's like, "Yeah, as soon as a lead comes in, I can email it, I can text it, I make the phone ring for the sales rep it's supposed to go to." And I was like, "No, you don't." I actually said that to him. I was like, "You can't do that. Nobody can do that. I've been looking for that answer for like 4 years, and I'm spending the most money on the highest dollar value CRM out there, and I can't do that." And he just looked at me like, "What are you talking about, Dave?" So long story short, he showed me the system, and I was like, "That's pretty rad." And so I did a little bit of pro bono consulting for him and coaching, like, "Hey, you need to start building this infrastructure for your tech company." And, his wife and my wife and us, we went out and had dinner, took us out to dinner for the consulting. And then he called me about 3 or 4 times and said, "Hey, come run it." And I said, "No." And then there's, some things happening with the company I was helping to run right at that moment. And I just decided that day, minutes before he called me, that it was time for me to find something else. And then he called, and the timing was perfect. And so I came over to help run ClientTether. And I didn't know a thing about franchising. In my mind, franchise was like McDonald's. That's what most people think about when they hear the word franchise, or an MLB franchise. But I had no idea like how extensive this industry was and how ubiquitous the business model was. I had no idea when I first came here.
Yeah, well, that's really common. A lot of people I talk to just think franchising are sports franchises or McDonald's or some of the big fast food chains. So there's this big educational process when you're helping people really understand how large the industry is and how many tentacles it has and how really a good business format can be applied to a lot of things. So, so when did you start working with ClientTether? How long ago was that?
It's been almost 6 years.
Wow, man, 6 years. Awesome. So tell us about some of the changing regulatory issues that are going to impact franchise development professionals, and how can they adapt to those?
Man, there's a lot. I mean, there's always anyone and this is about anyone who wants to engage with customers, right? So if you're going to buy a franchise and you're going to engage with customers, this is just as relevant to you as to, the guys that are selling franchises for a living. Texting and emailing and calling are getting kind of re-regulated in a different way soon, starting in January. So not much of a ramp. We've got 3 or 4 months until this is going to go live. There's always been can spam laws, right? So somebody wants to unsubscribe. If you're a business emailing, you've got to have an unsubscribe option in your emails. That's kind of table stakes, but you'd be shocked how few people are doing that in the business community. But this is like base level stuff. TCPA compliance, meaning it's the Telecommunication Consumer Protection Act. All of that is it's a system to say you have to have express opt-in from the consumer before you start texting them, and that's been around for a long time. Actually, it's pretty old, but it hasn't been in use for quite some time. So the thing that I find that's changing rapidly, though, is around how they're trying to blend some of these opt-in, opt-out processes together. So FCC is changing the rules around. It's what's called the one-to-one rule. That means that any system that's providing leads, so lead portals for franchise development or lead portals like Angie and Thumbtack for home service companies, right? They all now have to have an express one-to-one opt-in per brand. So a lot of them have if you fill out one of those forms, you might say, hey, I want to talk to Team Up Athletics. And then off the screen where you can't see it, 3 other check boxes have been checked that say, I also want to talk to I9 Sports and D1 Sports. And they try to find something relative, and then they sell your lead information off to 3 other people who you didn't know were going to contact you. That practice is going to disappear in January because it'll get regulated away.
Interesting. Yeah, I have heard that happen. A lot of people are just not aware that they didn't, unselect other brands within the same category. And they're surprised when they get calls from 4 people instead of 1 person. So that has happened. It's interesting you raised the point about how these laws, with texting and emailing are applicable not just in the franchise development side, but also on, like running the business, customer acquisition, engaging with them, because it's kind of the same thing. It's just a different type of, consultative sales process, right?
Yeah. And that's a big change that nobody's talking about. What it really means is people who are overly dependent upon lead portals, your Biz Buy Sells, your Franchise Gators, your Franchise Opportunities, whatever you're getting leads from in FriendUp, or Angie, Thumbtack, Modernize. Thumbtack's actually pretty well structured to support this already, but most of those lead sources, the people I'm talking to, they're saying lead volumes could drop 30 to 50%. But the quality will go up because they're no longer selling that quasi lead. They're just selling the person who said, I want to talk to Mike Halpern at Franchise QB, right? So the broker world I'm concerned about, because a lot of brokers buy these leads, but these leads are for Painter One. They're not for the broker. So I'm not sure how we're going to balance that out in the industry. There are a lot of big question marks. But the other big changes are around opt-in and opt-out. And I mentioned these rules have been around for a long time, but there's been no one enforcing them. But there's this regulatory group, I'll put that in air quotes, that's actually just the mobile phone companies. So Verizon, AT&T, the big boys, they all got together. They colluded and made an organization it's called A2P. And it's not the organization thing, but they created this whole idea of, hey, if anyone's texting consumers, then we're going to essentially tax them. They have to register with us to protect the consumer, but they have to pay us money, the cell phone companies, through this third-party entity called TRC, TCR, the Campaign Registry, which is a ghost organization with a ghost office in Reston, Virginia. That it's just a mail stop and no phone number, no email address to contact anyone. And that's how that organization is now regulating if they're going to approve people to text or not. And you have to pay $44 to get checked out, and then you have to pay $10 a month to have the privilege of texting as a business. This is the kind of the new norm. And it's really just a revenue play for the cell phone companies. They're making hundreds of millions of dollars off of this.
Wow, interesting. So how would you advise franchise development pros to connect with candidates when some of these new regulations come down the pike, and you have people that are still interested in exploring franchise ownership, and you have franchise companies and franchise consultants, coaches, and brokers that want to help them find their fit? Any advice on how they can continue to connect with great candidates when these new regulations have kind of been implemented?
Well, and I don't want this to seem too gloomy, right? They're just rules, right? It's like, franchise QB, there's a playbook, right? Your son's there's a first varsity game tonight. You're telling me about right before this. Like, there's a playbook. So you have to know the rules. So you can get approved, right? So you have to pay, I call it blood money to these guys to line their pockets so you have the privilege of texting again. But you just have to know what the rules are. You have to have proper opt-in on your website. You have to have proper language of your privacy policy. You have to have clear and visible opt-ins. You have to, if somebody says stop, you have to give them the option to opt out of your texting. And if they do, you have to be compliant with that, or else that's where the fines come in. So if you just know the rules, use technology to auto-enforce the rules, you're golden. So it doesn't need to be scary. I'll just say that. But you just have to know the rules and play by the rules, or else you're in trouble.
Right. Yeah, and it's good to have a technology partner that's out in front of it so that you don't have to get surprised and panic and make bad decisions when it comes time to comply with those rules. So any other advice on how anyone that's looking to help and kind of encourage franchise ownership from a consulting standpoint, how they can get a great ROI connecting with their candidates. Any kind of tips and tricks for kind of FranDev pros?
Yeah, of course. So in the world of FranDev, speed to lead is still king, right? Think about if you've got an eligible candidate who's really ready to buy, they're probably got a pretty high net worth. They're probably pretty busy, because you don't get a high net worth unless you're a trust fund baby without being busy and working hard. So and trust fund babies make the worst franchise owners anyway, so run away, because they're not going to want to work. They just want money. So anyway, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. So the reality is you've got to strike while the iron's hot. If somebody's filling out a lead form right now, the best time to talk to them is right now. There's crappy data in this industry. Like, this is the most backwards sales industry I've ever worked in, and I've consulted in like 10 industries. So that's not a ton, but that's still like everybody else plays by the same playbook. Get in touch with that lead within 5 minutes or less, and have an omni-channel outreach. So email automation is like table stakes. You got to be doing that. And use video in your emails, and that's going to triple your engagement in your emails. You put Mike's face in front of a candidate. It's like, hey, I'm Mike. I can't wait to talk to you. And these are the things I want to help you out with. That helps people emotionally connect. Then follow it up with a text within a couple of minutes, like 1 to 2 minutes. Text them. Be compliant with the reply, stop, to cancel, right? All that stuff. But text them, because most people prefer to text. That is an absolute game changer. And then follow that text with a call. So most people try to call first. And that changed about 5 years ago.
Yeah, you're right. I don't like when people call me. I'm not expecting the phone call. So I think the text is a nice soft, hey, when can we find a time to connect, and set aside 10 minutes to chat.
Yeah, I'm with you. So it's hard because you don't know the age of the person who filled out the form. But the older they are, the more they want to talk on the phone. The younger they are, the more they just want to text back and forth and not have the intrusion in their life of the inconvenience of having to do one thing at a time.
Yeah, so I think you need to know your audience, like who are you talking to, and some brands are going to attract certain candidates, and other ones will attract different batch of candidates. So you need to figure out how to customize your approach based on those kind of idiosyncrasies. So really good stuff, Dave. Anything else you want to add to the mix? Franchising in general, ClientTether, franchise ownership, before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I mean, just franchise ownership, just a plug for that. Like the whole value, this is a system, an industry that's built systems to support owners to get into business ownership who wouldn't normally be able to get into business ownership and succeed at the same rate. And I love franchising because the model facilitates non-traditional business entrepreneurs. Like, we have the highest rate of minorities, right, in the franchising industry that are successful running businesses. We have the highest percentage of women that are running businesses, higher than the average just across the board of just business ownership. Franchising excels at helping people who have no background in education in running businesses succeed in becoming independent. And I just think the less that if you find yourself relying exclusively on W-2s to thrive, there will come a time where that will not be sufficient. You're dependent upon other people making good decisions for you. I think business ownership, whether that's a side hustle to start and it becomes full-time, or a full-time gig, dive headfirst in and make it work, is going to be the best way to create financial stability and legacy for a family. Those are reasons why I'm all about entrepreneurship and business ownership. Be the guy that owns the business. You make a lot more money than the guy that runs the business.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, you come with a really interesting perspective because you own your own business and you're also the CEO of a tech company that happens to trade in franchising. So that's awesome. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate the time you spent with us today. And if anyone listening would like to connect with Dave to discuss franchising, ClientTether, contact me at franchiseqb.com or on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB. I'll get you guys connected. Thank you so much, Dave, for taking the time to get in the huddle and speak with us about ClientTether and franchising today.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Franchise QB podcast, where you're at the helm of your future as a franchise owner. If you enjoyed the content, please rate the show and recommend it to anyone that might be interested in franchising. Make sure to visit franchiseqb.com to subscribe to my newsletter and for an actionable playbook to go from walk-on to legend in your new business. Follow us on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB and join us every week for a new episode. See you next time.
Visit franchiseqb.com to take the next step of your journey towards wealth, independence, and franchise ownership. And remember, when working for the man gets old, you must do something bold. Thank you for listening.